Once upon a time, there was a man named Bobby O'Brien who never did a stitch of work in his life unless he absolutely had to. Come now, Bobby, his friends used to say. What's so wrong with a little hard work? You think it was the Black Plague itself, and way you guard yourself against it. My friends, I have no more against work than the next man, Bobby would reply. In fact, nothing fascinates me more than work. I can sit here and watch it all day if you'll only give me the chance. And of course, he was perfectly useless around the house. Aren't you ashamed of yourself now? His wife, Katie, moaned one afternoon. A fine example you're setting for the children. Do you want them to grow up to be lazy slugs too? It's Sunday, my dear, the day of rest, Bobby pointed out. Now, why would you want to be disturbing it? If you want my opinion, it's the only day out of the week worth getting out of bed for. The only problem with Sunday is that as soon as it's over, the rest of the week starts up again. Bobby was a great philosopher, having so much time on his hands. That very night, the whole family was sitting around the fire, waiting for their soup to boil, when what should they hear but a tap, tap, tap at the window. Bobby strolled over and raised the sash. Into the room hopped a little man no bigger than a strutting rooster. I was just passing by, the wee man said, and smelled something good and strong. I thought I might have a bite to eat. You're welcome to as much as you want, Bobby said, thinking that such a little man couldn't possibly hold more than a teaspoon or two. So the tiny fellow sat down at the fireside, but no sooner had Katy given him a steaming bowl than he slurped it down and asked for another. Katy gave him seconds, and he swallowed that one faster than the first. She gave him thirds, and he drained the bowl almost before she had filled it up. What a little pig, Bobby thought to himself. He'll have all our suppers before he's through. Still, I ask him in, and he's our guest, so we must hold our tongues. After 5 or 6 bowls, the little man smacked his lips and jumped off the stool. It's most kind you've been, he laughed. A more hospitable family I've never met. Now I must be on my way, but as a way of thanks, I'll be more than happy to grant the next wish uttered aloud beneath this roof. And with that, he hopped through the window and vanished into the night. Well, everyone wanted to wish for something different. One child wanted a big bag of sweets. The other child wanted a box of toys. Katy thought a new bed would be nice, as the old one was showing signs of collapse. Bobby could name a dozen or so things he'd like to have, right off the top of his head. Perhaps a new fishing pole, or maybe a chocolate cake. He says, we need more time to think it over, he declared. The trouble is, tomorrow's Monday morning, and there'll be work and chores to get in the way of our thinking. I wish we had a week of Sundays, and then we could take our time and figure it out. Now you've done it, Kate cried. You've gone and wasted our only wish on a week of Sundays. You might have wished for a few more brains in that thick head of yours before you opened your mouth for a wish like that. Well, it's not such a bad wish, you know, said Bobby, who was just now realizing what he had done. A week of Sundays will be a fine thing. After all, I've been needing a little rest, and this will give me the chance. Rest is the last thing you need, you lazy bag of bones, Katy moaned, hustling the children off. But the next morning, when Bobby woke up to hear the church bells pealing, he remembered he had 7 whole days before him of not having a thing in the world to do. He decided he had made the wisest of all possible wishes. He lolled around in bed all morning while Kate took the children to church. He didn't bother to rouse himself until he finally smelled a nice plump chicken coming out of the oven for Sunday dinner. What a remarkable event, he yawned and stretched as he sat down at the table. King Solomon himself could never have wished for such a wonderful thing as a week of Sundays. And after he had stuffed himself, he wandered outside and took a nap beneath his favorite tree. The next day he lay in bed all morning again and got up only when church was safely over. But the only thing Katie had put on the table was a few chicken bones left from the day before, when Bobby had eaten the whole Sunday dinner. The next day was even worse. Bobby sat down with a roaring appetite, only to find porridge and potatoes gracing the table. "Now what kind of dinner is this?" he asked. "Have you forgotten what day of the week it is? Porridge and potatoes aren't fit for Sunday, my dear." "And what else did you expect?" Katie cried. "How am I supposed to buy a new chicken with every shop in the village closed for 7 straight days? It's all that we have in the cupboard, so you'd better get used to it, my good man." Well, the next morning, Bobby's stomach was growling so fiercely he couldn't help but getting out of bed a little earlier than the usual Sunday custom. He wandered around the kitchen a bit, checking here and checking there for a bite to eat, but he found only a loaf of stale bread in the pantry. "You know, my dear," he said, "I've been thinking. I need a bit of exercise. I believe I'll go out to the garden and dig a few potatoes for dinner." "You'll do nothing of the sort," Kate snapped. "I won't have you digging potatoes on Sunday morning with the neighbors passing by on their way to church. That won't do at all." "But there's nothing in the house but bits of stale bread," Bobby cried. "And who do you have to blame but yourself and your week of Sundays for that?" Kate asked. The next day, Bobby was up at the crack of dawn, pacing back and forth across the house, drumming his fingers on every windowsill. The children followed him everywhere he went until the church bells began to peal, and then they bawled and whimpered to no end. "What's wrong with these young ones?" Bobby whined. "Have all their manners gone and left them? And what do you expect after all?" Katie cried. "The poor little things have sat through more sermons in a week now than you've snored through all year. Their backs are sore from living in pews, and they've tossed every last penny they've been saving onto that collection plate." "They should be in school, that's where," Bobby declared. "And who, may I ask, is to blame for that?" Kate inquired. On the 6th Sunday, Bobby was so fidgety and bored, he decided to go to church with the rest of the family. Every head in the congregation swung around when he came through the door and crept up the aisle. "There's the man," the preacher cried from the pulpit. "Here's the rascal who kept me up every night this week, racking my poor brain for another new sermon. Here's the troublemaker who's ruined every last throat in the choir and almost worn the fingers off of the poor organist. I guess you've come to survey your dirty work now, have you?" And when the service was over, Bobby found the neighbors lined up to greet him. "Well now," asked one, "did you stop to think of how we're to bring in the harvest with so many Sundays getting in the way? And how are the rest of us to make a living, having to keep our doors closed all week?" asked the butcher and the baker. "And what about the washing and the ironing and mending?" someone yelled. "Do you know how much is piled up for next Monday, should it ever come again? And by the way," said the schoolmaster, "have you been taking care of your children's lessons, or have they forgotten how to read and write by now?" Bobby made his way home as fast as he could. "Thank goodness there's only one Sunday left," he sighed as soon as he was safe behind his own door. Any more would be dangerous to a man's health. The last Sunday was the longest day of Bobby's life. The minutes passed like hours, and the hours stretched into eternity. Bobby twiddled his thumbs and stood on one foot and walked in circles and watched the clock. Is this thing broken? He cried, grabbing it from the mantel and shaking it till its insides rattled. You can't tell me the time has ever dragged by so slow. When have you ever wanted a Sunday to end? Katie asked. Aren't you forgetting that tomorrow is Monday? Forgetting? It's all I can think about, Bobby exclaimed. I've never in my life looked forward to any day as much as this Monday morning. The shadows slowly crept across the lawn. The sun finally went down, and just as the first star popped into the sky, who should become rapping at the window but the same little man who visited 1 week ago. And how did you enjoy your wish? He asked Bobby. Not very much, I'm afraid, said Bobby. Really? Exclaimed the little man. Then you wouldn't want to trade another bite to eat for another week of Sundays? For goodness sake, no, cried Bobby. The only days of rest I want are the ones I've worked 6 days to earn. It took me all week to learn that lesson, and I won't be forgetting it any time soon. So I'll thank you to be gone with your wishes, my friend. And at that, the little man disappeared and was never seen again.